I saw some chat about the Nazi thing. Never talk to a Nazi. Like, what about if the Nazi was 17 or 18? Like,
Yeah,
is there
look,
is there a line? Is there a line where you kind of go, they're 40 and they're done, they're 17 and they're still influenceable? Is there a line there anywhere you think about maybe you could get through to these people still?
Um, yeah, there is, and look, there's a lot of the similar conversations around talking to various marginalized, radicalized groups. You know, we talked about it a bit with the anti-vaxxer crowd and that sort of thing. Is that I get what he's saying, that surely we would prefer to have dialogue, but
Mm,
there's some people you
yeah,
cannot have a
I agree.
dialogue with. I mean, when he was talking about this guy who ran for council in Upper Hutt, this is a guy that's involved with the leadership of a white supremacist group. He's not someone who stumbled into it in his early teens or something, and he's been telling some edgy jokes online. I think that this is a guy that's been in that life for near on a decade, and
Don't you
I
think
think
that? Don't you think that's the one instance though where maybe? And look, I don't know Dane personally. I'm not going to
mm,
defend him, but he's Jewish. He's not just Jewish, like culturally. He attends synagogue. He's a Jewish
oh,
Jew.
for sure,
And we're talking about this guy who was sort of a, I don't know if Nazi is the correct term. You know how much I dislike labels in general, but certainly the focus on the Jewish community. So wouldn't that be the one area that if Dane in particular wanted to interact with that person, he's not virtue signaling about someone else's issues. It's
no.
actually that's the one that's actually his issue. The one.
I think if he wants to sit down and have a dialogue with this guy and he wants to burn up his time, absolutely do it. But I don't think he's going to win anybody over there.
Maybe.
And I don't see the benefit in sitting across the table. And I say this for someone that's not in one of these marginalized groups. You know, I'm not, you know, but why would you sit across the table from someone that nominally wants you to not exist? And that can apply for so many of these groups. There's nothing to be gained. You're not going to convince them. He's not going to perk up halfway through a podcast and go, "You've shown me the error of my ways." That's something that takes years to get people out of that. You're not going to do it in a podcast.
Yeah.
You know, I've said it in the chat. I think it's honourable for people to have the empathy to do it, but there's so many people out there that are in these marginalised groups that, or are dealing with the really nasty, hardened fringes of these groups, and we all know where the dance is going to end. It's going to end in the same place. So there are some forms of speech that I just cannot get there. As I said in the chat, we all got together, we had a big discussion about some of the things that the Nazis thought were a good idea, and we all just generally decided that over about a 5-year period that no Nazis. We're done with that one. We don't need to relitigate that.
I like the thought. In fact, it feels weird putting up one of your texts in the thing, but so it's a bit meta. But this idea about intellectual exercise with no stakes, I don't know if I entirely agree with that, because he is Jewish, and obviously there has been some. He's talking about anti-Semitism, but in general, not pointing necessarily at Dane, but at in general, we do get involved in academic theoretical conversations when we have no stakes. I mean, both you and I have said many times, we're not marginalized. Like, we're not one of these groups, so we can't understand it. I don't know about this idea about why would you sit across from someone who marginally wants you dead. It just reminded me of this story, and I found it, which is why I was looking off to the distance. I wasn't ignoring you, Chewy. I was doing research. This is a CNN story, I think from last year or from 2020. What happened when a Klansman met a black man in Charlottesville? This guy here, and look, I haven't got all the details for you. He talks to Klansmen, and he has a collection of Klan robes from people he's turned around. Right? He is the subject, the target of these Klansmen. And look, he's obviously the exception and not the rule, because most of us can't do this and can't get through. But I guess I kind of go, I don't want people to give up entirely, because if they did, this black man in America wouldn't be talking to these large number of people in the KKK and helping them come out of the KKK. So these are the robes that you can see that he's collected from people who he has gotten out of the KKK through interactions with him. So I don't want to sit here and go, so there you go, everyone can do it, because not everyone can do it, but some can.
I would also accept a collection of scalps.
Yeah.
But that's probably just out of frame.
You know what I mean? Some can sit across from those people. I'm not saying I can, and I'm not actually standing up and saying that Dane can. I don't have a clue, but some can. Some can break through for some reason.
I think when you're talking about groups like the Klan and I think specifically racist groups, perhaps there is a common thread there with other marginalized groups. You just need to start speaking the same language,
right?
But I'm sure that the conversations that he's having with people, and I can only imagine the enormous reserves of empathy and patience that man must have to get through to these people, that it's not a quick conversation that's ended with, oh, you've convinced me, here's my robes. That man would have put in some work. Also wouldn't have got through to all of them.
It's also it's proselytizing, like in religions. The best way to convert someone is to spend a lot of time with them one-on-one. So I'm not saying that I'm not suggesting that he's also the example for everybody, because, as I said, not everyone can do that. But I guess what I'm saying is, me, Chewy, it's both a strength and a weakness. I do struggle with absolutes, like the whole never talk to a Nazi. I struggle with that because I know there's a guy called Christian Picciolini who I've done on a podcast with. He's a former white supremacist.
Yeah, I'm familiar with him. Yep.
Yeah, well, I interact with Christian probably once a year, once every 8 months, and he's going to come back on and do another podcast with us. And now he spends his time getting Nazis out. So his job is to kind of speak to Nazis, and that's what he does. So I guess for me personally, without using this as a defense, to say, so everything's okay, so we should keep on going, I also can't go the other path and go, we should never do it either. So I go, what I guess I hope is that the people who are best equipped to have those conversations are having those conversations. Yep. And for some people, like we played Mike King last night in tears because he's exhausted with the work. He's burnt out. He can't do it at the moment. There's people who are going to be, and I saw some comments in the chat about people who are just can't have these conversations anymore. It's time for a break. It's time for a rest. Don't do it. But there are other people who can and have these conversations, and I want to encourage those people who are meant to have the conversations to have them, and also say to the people who can't have them or don't want to, that's also okay as well.
Yeah, 100%.